Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't. I'm EDJ, and I'm going to be reacting to the Alexander the Great series from Epic History TV. And man, what can I say about Alexander the Great which hasn't literally been said about everyone, right? Like, he's the conqueror that other conquerors, look up to or, respect. I remember when Hannibal met Scipio and mentioned that mentioned Alexander as one of the best of all time. Julius Caesar, you know that famous story, right? The one where he wept because Alexander accomplished more than him when he was younger, around the same age. I think even Napoleon talked highly about Alexander, so goated, right? He's like the goat of conquerors. And I guess I could mention some stuff that I know about him. I do research. I think when it comes to battle tactics, he was obviously a genius. He had the handbill and hammer tactics. His great use of cavalry combined with the Greek phalanx. I'm not saying it correctly, but either way, like he didn't invent the phalanx, but he definitely perfected it and used it to its fullest ability. And just never lost a battle. One of the greatest things you could attribute to him. And yeah, he was the son of King Philip. And when I learn about Greece, it's really amazing that Greece is more seen as a culture. It wasn't really a unified single political entity. And there's always a lot of warring, even learning about the Spartans and their beef with other groups like the Athenians, and even working with the Persians at one point. Like it's insane, I think a lot of people have the misconception that the Greeks were all united, which really wasn't the case. But Alexander the Great really unified a lot, and he created the Greek Empire. And I guess the greatest tragedy is his death at such a young age, because a lot of people are like, what if he had lived to be an old person? How far would he have gone? What would have happened? There's so much to this guy. One of the most interesting and fascinating historical figures of all time. Top 10 for sure, right? Some little known facts I know about him: he believed himself to be descended from like a like divine, in a sense. And he looked up a lot to Achilles. I think he even attributed himself being descended from Achilles from the Iliad, Greek mythology. I remember reading that he carried around the Iliad. And it's kind of cool that he just emulated someone. Reminds me of what I what I do, except obviously you know not Achilles. If the point is, and yeah, I had a really weird relationship with his mom. There are some things that are said. I won't go full into those because I'm not sure how much of it is true. But yeah, there's so much to say, quite frankly. I was about to get into the theological thing, his travel to Jerusalem, and even the Bible prophesies. I won't get into the theology. Like I said, I leave that for my main channel. But yeah, there's a lot to say. Just I'm really looking forward to learning even deeper more about Alexander the Great. Everything I mentioned right now, I kind of learned on my own, and because I have this really big love for studying ancient battle commanders, Hannibal, Napoleon, Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, their campaigns and just what they did. I don't know why, I just find that stuff so interesting. And I remember when I was a DM in D&D, I would create legendary figures based off these people who used tactics, and was kind of introducing my friends to it indirectly. I don't know. Like I said, I just can't think of anyone better to start with than Alexander the Great. Well, I should probably get into it, and I'll learn plenty more, I'm sure. And yeah, so before I jump right into it, I want to say this video belongs to Epic History TV. If you look down in the description down below, you will see a link to this video. Feel free to check it out without my talking, or you don't want to see my face interrupting the video. And, always support the original creator, So yeah, with that said, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's watch Alexander the Great, Part 1 by Epic History TV. Oh wait, before I start this video, there are some important things I forgot to mention in my intro. Alexander the Great was Macedonian, he was from Macedonia. Something else is that he basically conquered the Persian Empire. And finally, what's really something interesting about him is that he personally fought in battles. Like, a lot of military leaders that we think of, especially nowadays, usually lead from, the back, but Alexander was in the thick of it, to say it, I guess. He was there, he took injuries, he fought, he was one of the boys, essentially, which always always just inspires a lot of loyalty, right? It's like when you see your leader there, it's like, whoa, Also, it kind of makes sense, him kind of looking up to Achilles and wanting to be there in the fray and, show his own battle prowess, which he obviously had. Like, it takes a lot of guts, especially if Alexander had just been taken out, like, the rest of the army would fall apart. The fact that he fought so many battles, never lost, and was there fighting with everyone is just a testament to his skill. And, with most leaders, you think that's dumb, but with Alexander, it's like, nah, that's just him being Alexander the Great, But yeah, sorry, I just felt like I should mention those things. I'm kind of running down. I'm not as ignorant about Alexander the Great. I guess I just want to show that I know a bit about the guy, and hoping to expand any knowledge that I have already of him. This is the first time I ever watched an Epic History TV video, so I don't know what to expect, to be honest.
Ancient Greece. From around 500 BC, this rugged land was the scene of remarkable developments in art, philosophy, and warfare. Its two greatest city-states were Athens, a naval power where democracy, art, drama, and philosophy flourished.
Yeah, Athens. It's always referred to as the birthplace of democracy, and yeah, very innovative. Ancient Greek city-states were very innovative.
And Sparta, an austere, militaristic society, famed for its formidable army.
Something else I really like about Spartans is that slavery was such a huge part of their culture. Like, basically every able-bodied man, basically all men in Sparta, had to be in the military, but there still had to be stuff like farming and whatnot. So Sparta had such a, slavery was a huge part of their culture, which is funny because, in a movie like 300, they portray the Spartans as the fighters for freedom, and the Persians as these evil hellspawn. Which I get it. It was from a comic book from Frank Miller, and it was kind of told through. It was meant to be told through a biased perspective. It's still funny,
480 BC, these two city-states had joined forces to fight an invasion by the mighty Persian Empire. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a small Greek force led by 300 Spartans held up the enormous Persian army for 3 days, before they were finally encircled and killed.
So, I'm not gonna pretend I know... Oh, by the way, the Battle of Thermopylae, one of the most epic battles in history. I like the 300 movie, by the way. It is fun to watch, even if, obviously, it is not completely accurate, but, you know, I was looking at some videos, like, about the Persian Empire. Like I said, I don't know much about it, but it was comparing, like, the Spartans against the Persians, and how the Persians actually weren't that bad of an empire. Well, you could technically say every empire's bad, because they all had to conquer and, you know, like, kill, obviously. You could say every empire's bad, but if you want to check it out yourself, the video is called "Why the Persians in 300 are the good guys." Like, when it came to slavery, they were nearly not as bad. I think the video said that they didn't really have slavery, and that they were a lot more welcoming towards other cultures, letting them retain their, you know, their ways and traditions. They were, you know, they weren't, like, evil, but then again, like I said, you could say every empire is evil. You could go in that argument. Just definitely look it up. Like, it was interesting to look at.
Then, in the Straits of Salamis, the Greek fleet defeated the Persian navy. But they couldn't prevent the Persians burning the sacred temples of the Athenian Acropolis. The next year at Plataea, the Greeks won a decisive land battle against the Persians and forced them to abandon their invasion.
We have all seen the devastating images in the news.
Oh, hey,
Homes
Liam Neeson.
destroyed, loved ones.
The next 50 years were the golden age of classical Greece. But rising tension between Athens and Sparta and their allies eventually led to war, dragging the Greek world into decades of destructive fighting. Wars between the Greek city-states continued for almost a century, leaving them exhausted and vulnerable to a new rising power to the north. For centuries, sophisticated Greeks had viewed the mountainous kingdom of Macedonia as a backwater, Hicksville, barely Greek at all. But under King Philip II, Macedonia emerged as a formidable military force.
Yeah, so I didn't mention this in the intro, but yeah, Philip basically made the army, you know, and a lot of people don't talk about his, you know, everyone gets to the meat and the potatoes of Alexander the Great and his exploits, but, you know, Alexander obviously owes a lot to his father, because Philip is the guy who built the Macedonian army that Alexander took and, you know, went to conquer so much with. Like, I guess the appropriate saying would be, like, you know, Philip walked so Alexander could run. And you know, it was cool learning about that. I'm trying to quit Reddit and, like, forums, because a lot of people are like, I don't know, a lot of people try to discredit Alexander because obviously he inherited that army, but, like, you know, he did so much with it, and I don't think that should take away from anything he accomplished. You know, he is still very deserving of the title, the Great, but it's good for Philip to receive some recognition. You know, I feel like he kind of gets shafted. You know, I don't know.
His most famous reform? The introduction of the sarissa, an 18-foot pike, twice the length of a normal Greek spear, and wielded by trained infantry, fighting in close formation, known as a phalanx.
Phalanx.
In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip's army crushed the joint forces of Thebes and Athens. Through alliance and conquest, Philip had already gained control over most of his neighbours. Now, following this victory, he united all Greece in an alliance known as the Hellenic League, or League of Corinth, with Philip as hegemon, or...
So, I think a funny story about Philip II is that by the point, like this point when he rose to prominence and power, like, he didn't conquer Sparta, because Sparta was already kind of past its heyday, like, its prime and its supremacy over the Greek, like, world was kind of gone, and they were a little bit, you know, like, past their prime, to put it nicely. And apparently he, like, sent an envoy or something, he sent a message, like, for them to, like, I think he meant to join or, like, you know, submit. And he made threats, like, I think he said, if I came, would I be welcomed as friend or foe? And Sparta said neither. That old Spartan wit is just the funniest thing. And then he made a bunch of threats, like, if I go there, I will, you know, beat you up and, you know, all this. And then Sparta just replied, if. Like, even though Philip probably could have just destroyed them, the fact that they were so, like, defiant is hilarious. He didn't, because I guess he figured it wasn't worth the effort at that point, but I don't know, that's just a funny story I remember from Philip. I'm actually a little bit impressed at how much I'm remembering. Like, I thought I would be like, you know, it's not like with the Rome or Byzantine series where I'm just like, I don't know what the heck's going on from Dovahadi. Then again, we didn't learn about Byzantines at all in school, and I never really cared much to really research much about the Eastern Roman half of the empire.
Supreme Commander. Only Sparta stood aside. Philip began to plan a great campaign, a pan-Hellenic or all-Greek war against the Persian Empire. Their old foe was now an ailing superpower, its great riches ripe for the taking. But on the eve of launching his war, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard, victim of Macedonia's brutal court rivalries. He was succeeded by...
Yeah, there are theories, actually, I remember reading. Obviously, I don't buy into them, because they're just theories, but, like, some people have proposed, like, you know, his wife Olympia, like, killed him, or even Alexander did, to gain more glory, like... these are other interesting things. It reminds me of, like, the theories from Rome, like when people say Livia, the first empress, wife of Augustus, murdered like the majority of the Julio-Claudian family, or like Tiberius murdered Germanicus. It's like we don't really know. A lot of people buy into that, but as far as I can see, there's no historians who are like backing that up. But you know, it's just interesting, like these theories, right? And never really knowing, like, I don't know.
His 20-year-old son, Alexander, brilliant, restless, tutored by the great philosopher Aristotle.
Yes, he was tutored. I believe it was Aristotle who gave his copy of the Iliad to Alexander. So yeah, he was definitely taught by, you know, a great mind there. And yeah, something else I forgot to mention in my opening. There's so much with Alexander. Like, if I had spent the entire opening mentioning everything, the opening may have been longer than it already was, my intro to this video. But yeah, he died really young. He was like 33, you know? He accomplished so much as a young person. Like, you know? It's like, it's just amazing. His, like, almost mania to just win glory and conquer. He's almost like a Greek hero, like from mythology, right? That he idolized. He's almost like that, but real life. Like, you know?
And already an experienced military commander. Alexander inherited his father's grand plan to invade Persia, but first he had to secure his own position as king. At home, he had potential rivals executed, then crushed rebellions in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece. He made a special example of Thebes, completely destroying the ancient city and selling its people into slavery. In the spring of 334 BC, now ready to launch his war against the Persian Empire, Alexander led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor. It was the start of one of the greatest military campaigns in history.
This is how AG1 works to upgrade your health routine. By
Alexander's army was about 40,000 strong, drawn from all parts of Greece. The infantry were commanded by the veteran Macedonian general Parmenion. In the front rank, 9,000 Macedonian phalangites,
Sorry, I was talking to my grandma.
armed with the 18-foot sarissa. These were professional soldiers, well-trained and drilled, who formed up for battle in the phalanx, 16 ranks deep. This packed formation presented a solid wall of iron.
Wow, it looks so beautiful. Like I've only imagined what the Greek phalanx was, but like just seeing it in action, or as close to action, you know, animated. But man, it is formidable. It looks so cool. Like I said, this is the first time I've watched an Epic History TV video. So, or no, he did the Alexander the Great speech when his men mutiny. I think he did. Never mind, this is the second time I've watched a Epic History TV video, but like I said, I'm so used to the Dova Hadi unbiased history that it's weird to just see something more straightforward history, you know, without all the humor and room for being inaccurate. But I don't know. I just love the animation. Like I said, this is really cool.
Spear tips and was virtually unstoppable. But it was also difficult to maneuver and highly vulnerable to attacks on its flanks or rear.
Yeah, so I was looking a lot into the Roman conquest of Greece and how they managed to defeat the phalanx, and yeah, that's something that was mentioned. Like the phalanx wasn't as adaptable, and the Romans defeating it, like, you know, I don't know. It's a cool video. I definitely recommend looking more into it because I was so interested in seeing how Rome defeated Greece.
So 3,000 elite infantry, the hypaspists, or shield bearers, armed with shorter spears, guarded its flanks. They were commanded by Parmenion's son, Nicanor. The second line of Alexander's army was made up of 7,000 Greek allies and 5,000 mercenaries, armed as hoplites. They took their name from the hoplon, their large round shield, and carried shorter 8-foot spears. A hoplite phalanx was not as effective as the Macedonian phalangites, but still well armed and heavily armoured for the time. The Agrianes were the army's elite skirmishers, expert javelin throwers from what's now southern Bulgaria. Other skirmishers from Thrace and Illyria were armed with javelins, slings and bows. The shock troops of Alexander's army were the Companion Cavalry, 1,800 elite horsemen, armed with spear and sword, commanded by Philotas, another son of Parmenion. Alexander led the royal squadron in person. There were also 1,800 cavalry from Thessaly, commanded by Callas. 600 from other parts of Greece, led by Erigyius, and 900 mounted scouts from Thrace and Paeonia under Cassander. The great Persian Empire was divided into provinces, called satrapies. Each satrapy was ruled by a governor, or satrap. Those in Asia Minor, now threatened by Alexander's invasion, met to discuss strategy. Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, urged them to avoid battle with Alexander. Instead, he advised them to use a scorched earth strategy, to burn villages and crops and withdraw to the interior.
The famous scorched
Alexander's army, he promised, would quickly starve. It was good advice, but the satraps were unwilling to lay waste to their own provinces without a fight. So they decided to face Alexander's army at the river Granicus.
Oh boy.
The Persian army formed up behind the river, which was shallow but 60 feet wide with steep banks. Their front line was a wall of cavalry, about 10,000 horsemen from across the empire. Medes and Hyrcanians from modern Iran, Bactrians from Afghanistan, and Paphlagonians from Turkey's Black Sea coast. Behind, in reserve, were the infantry, several thousand Greek mercenaries, a common sight in Persian armies at this time. These men fought for Persian gold, and were armed with the round shield and short spear of hoplites. The Persians may have been unsure if they could trust these men in combat against fellow Greeks, and so placed them at the rear.
To be fair, Greeks fighting each other isn't completely
Alexander,
new.
determined to attack and destroy this Persian force before it could retreat, raced to the Granicus with his best troops. On his left wing he posted Thessalian, Greek and Thracian cavalry under Parmenian's command. In the centre were the massed spears of the phalanx, its 6 divisions commanded by Perdiccas, Koinos, Amintas, Philip, Meleager and Crateros. On the right, Alexander himself with the companion cavalry under Philotas, as well as the elite Hypaspists, the Agrianes javelin throwers, and the archers. Alexander, with 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry in all, was probably slightly outnumbered. But ignoring advice to wait until dawn to cross the river, he ordered an immediate assault. He sent a squadron of companion cavalry to ford the river, followed by a regiment of Hypaspists and the Paeonian light cavalry. Alexander, calling on his men to show their courage, then led his right wing across the river. As they reached the middle of the river, the Greeks came under a hail of javelins, darts and arrows from the Persian line. Those that made it to the far bank were immediately charged by the Persian cavalry. Alexander was in the thick of the fighting.
What a chat.
He attacked where the whole mass of their cavalry and leaders were stationed. Around him, a desperate conflict raged. Horses were jammed against horses, and men against men. The Macedonians striving to drive the Persians away from the riverbank. The Persians determined to prevent them crossing, and to push them back into the river. Alexander's attack seemed reckless, but he was buying time for the rest of his army to cross the river, including the irresistible Macedonian phalanx. Then, suddenly, Alexander was fighting for his life, charged by 2 Persian nobles. Roisaces rode up to Alexander and struck him on the head with his sword, breaking off a piece of his helmet. But the helmet broke the force of the blow, and Alexander struck him down with his lance. Then, from behind, Mithridates raised his sword against the king, but Black Clitus, son of Dropidas, anticipated his blow, struck his arm, and cut it off, sword and all. Now the Greek army was across the river, and the Persian cavalry faced a wall of Macedonian spears. Most turned and fled. The speed and shock of Alexander's attack meant Persia's Greek mercenaries hadn't even had time to join the battle. Alexander, in a blood rage, or possibly regarding these Greeks as traitors, ignored their appeals for mercy. The mercenaries were surrounded on all sides and massacred. Alexander had won a great victory. Asia Minor now lay at his mercy. But the Persian Empire was still a land of immense wealth and power. Already, it was mobilizing its vast resources to face him. If Alexander was to conquer this empire and take his place in history, he'd next have to face Darius, King of Kings himself. Research and artwork for this video comes from Osprey Publishing's extensive range of books on ancient history. Every Osprey book examines a particular battle, campaign, or combat unit in authoritative, meticulous detail. And with more than 3,000 titles, they cover everything from ancient warfare to modern conflict. Visit their website to see their online catalogue. Huge thanks to the YouTube channel Invicta for their help in making this series. You can find out more about the remarkable life of Alexander the Great in their Moments in History series.
So, yeah, that's it. Wow. I'm so used to like the longer Dovahadi, like 40 to like 30 minutes, but I love this was short and sweet. I like reacting to shorter videos. I find it easier to get through. But yeah, this was great, and it's left me wanting more. I love learning, and like I said, I already have knowledge about Alexander the Great because of my own personal interest in battle, like studying how great military leaders win battles. So it will be great to seeing more of just the tactical genius of Alexander played out. And I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction, and I will see you all next time. Bye everyone.